And my clock says it's 7, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So for those of you who are joining me, welcome back to Going Live with Grace on Mondays. I'm happy to see you guys all here. Tonight, as you already know, we are painting Deer at Sunset. So if you can see that up in the top left of your screen, that is our guide for tonight. And our paintings might not look exactly like that, but it's okay. So tonight, as many of you know, we have 2 rules. The first is just to have fun, and the second one is no negativity. Just have fun at home. I wish you guys could be here in the studio so badly with me tonight, but this will have to work. And also, if you guys have any questions tonight, don't be shy, throw them in the comments. And as soon as I see them, I'll answer them just like that. But hopefully, I see them quickly enough. And if I don't, just keep commenting, hey you. And I'll eventually answer your question, I promise. So tonight, a little bit before we start, we're going to want to remember to take care of our brushes. Acrylic dries very quickly, and we don't want to let it dry on the bristles. So when we're not painting, keep your paintbrushes in your cup of water to kind of preserve them and keep them nice. So also, if you're just getting settled, make sure you have your canvas, your 5 colors laid out in front of you tonight, some cups of water, a paint palette, and your paper towel. I recommend having 2 paper towels. I think that's easier. I kind of go paper towel crazy and dry my brushes off a lot. And I also have 2 cups of water. So we're going to be using a lot of colors tonight, really ranging from super dark to super light, and I don't want to make my colors muddy. So I just recommend having 2 ready right away in case you need some fresh water halfway through and you don't miss anything from the live. And to answer your question, Nancy, I'm all on my own tonight. So if we do need any help, it's all me. Hi, Anne, I just got your comment. Good to see you in here. So if you guys did order the art kit to go, let's just go through what's in it. You have your pre-sketched canvas, all of your paints, which you can uncap and get ready. And if you ordered brushes, I know you've got 2 brushes in there. Mine might look a little different than yours, but the main point is that we have 1 large brush and 1 small brush. And that's what we'll be focusing on tonight to get through this painting. And then you'll be left with getting your water, palette, and your paper towel on your own. And don't forget the instructions. So this painting has a lot of steps that are very detailed. Don't be too concerned by that. They're detailed just so it really can help you walk through the color sequence, but it's nothing too complicated. However, if you do get lost or fall a little bit behind, don't be afraid to just refer back to your directions. And if you don't have directions, just follow along with me. I'll try not to lose you guys in the dust. I won't go too quickly tonight. And if I do, just comment, don't be afraid. I'm sure there are other people at home who are thinking the same thing if you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot keep up with this girl. Okay. Yes, Nancy, I see that you got different brushes in your kit. I'm using some that look a little bit different tonight because I have a lot smaller canvas. The canvases we sent out are much larger, so we give you a brush that is quite a bit larger than this. So this is just so it kind of slows me down and we all paint at the same pace. So don't worry about that. I'll just call them big and small brushes. And we'll just go with that. So no worries. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. We'll talk about the first step. So what we're going to do tonight is work from top to bottom. If you've painted with me, this is generally how we do it. And first of all, we're going to start off with our dark blue and work our way down to our horizon line. And the important thing to remember here is to always rinse your brush out between colors to avoid getting muddy. We will be blending, but it's good to just really rinse out your brush super well so you don't get kind of like brown colors and funky ones like that. So we'll start at the top, and I'm just going to scoop some blue paint onto my palette here. And we're going to go just along the top edge here. On your large canvas, go about 1 inch down. I'll go just a little less than that. And we're just going to do horizontal strokes, working our way down the canvas. If your paint isn't spreading very nicely, add just a touch of water to your brush. And as I always tell you guys, I love to paint the edges of my canvases. I think it makes it look complete. So if you would like to do that, I invite you to do so, and I'll keep reminding you periodically to continue painting the edges, because sometimes even I get carried away and forget to do a section, and I'm like, oh shoot, I have to remix that color. And it's not the easiest thing in the world. Okay. So after we add the pure blue, we're going to come in with red, and as you guys can see in our little reference photo, or the painting behind me on the wall, we're just working our way down, getting lighter and lighter where that sun is setting behind our cute little deer. So I have all the blue that I want, and one thing to keep in mind, these lines don't have to be perfectly straight. The sky is going to melt into many different colors. So don't worry about getting a perfectly straight horizontal line. It's going to get kind of messy. And then we're going to take some red and mix that with our blue to make a little purple. So you can see down in the bottom corner here. And I'll start putting that just along the edge of the blue that I've already created. So I'm just dragging that back and forth. I want them to blend slightly. I don't want to blend them so much that there's no discrepancy between the two. But I'll just do a little bit to kind of pull that purple up into the blue. And I'm going to do it at varying heights. So I'll pull the purple up just a little bit higher in this area and lower in the other area, so it's not just like perfect stripes. Just want to shake it up. And I'll keep painting my edges and continuing that pattern. I don't know about you guys, but there are deer all over the roads, and I've seen a million of them outside. So this actually looked a lot like what I saw yesterday driving home. Fortunately, they weren't in the road. Okay. So now I have my purple, and I want to switch colors pretty quickly. I don't want to take up my entire sky with dark colors. That should just be on the very edge. It's okay if yours goes down a little bit further than mine, of course, but I would like more light colors in my painting, so I'm going to keep it dark just at the edges and start adding in my light as I go right away. And then the next bit, I'll just add in pure red, pulling that down along the edges of my purple. And I do know that some of these colors are a little more transparent than others, so if you have to go over like with a couple coats of red or something like that, absolutely come back and do that. Everyone's painting is a little different. So you know what you need, you're the artist. I'm giving you guidelines tonight, but our paintings will not be identical, and that's all right. And of course, we're going to put some clouds in here later too. So some of this canvas will actually be filled with clouds. So no need to worry. If you guys are having fun, give me a thumbs up in the comments. If you need any help with anything, just throw that question out there and I will absolutely answer it. Sometimes I just get in the groove and keep painting, get lost in it. So right now I'm about a quarter of the way down my canvas, maybe just a touch less. And that's about where I want to be with my red. Just slightly further. And then I'll come in with some lighter colors as well. And I'm starting to get those really solid lines I was talking about. I don't want it to be like blue, purple, red, perfectly blocked out. So to maybe blend that in just a touch more, I'm going to pull a little blue right there in the corners on the edges and see how they kind of just melt together. And there can be some space between the colors too. Just like that. I want my sky to be pretty streaky. And keep in mind, there will be clouds here, so you don't have to fuss too much with the details of the sky, since clouds will take up the majority of the upper part. It's kind of fun to drag those colors back in there. Okay, so the majority of my sky is red for the top portion, for like the top third of my canvas. And then it melts into a beautiful orange. And to make that, I'm going to add a dot of red to some yellow. Red is a really powerful color. When you mix these two, you always want to mix the darker color into a larger amount of the lighter color. Otherwise, you'll end up with a pile of paint this big, and you'll just be trying to make that perfect ratio. So always do a small amount of the dark to more of the light. So you can see down here in the corner. Okay. And I'll mix in some red. And then now I have my beautiful orange in the corner there. So I'm going to pull that into the reds. And the sky you want to keep going with you want to go as quickly as you can, so we keep these colors blended. Now I want to add a little more yellow in. And try to avoid the silhouette of your deer as much as possible. I'm going to go around the antlers ever so slightly. Since I'm using lighter colors over the top of them, it's okay if you overlap it just a smidge, because oftentimes you can see the pencil lines through it. And we'll definitely come back in and clean up the edges with some of our darker colors later. And I'm going to try to keep the same color on either side of the deer as I go. It's a lot of little areas in here on the antlers, so just be careful with that. But like I said, it is okay if you cover a bit of it. If you're having trouble with your larger brush right between these antlers, switch to your small brush for this little stint of painting. Just between his antlers and his ears. And that might help you get the details down a bit better. I'm going to risk it and keep using my big brush, but this seems to be working okay. Okay, so now I have some orange in there. And then once we have some of this orange in here, we're going to start blending white into it. The sun is directly behind the two deer standing there, so that will be the lightest spot. And as I work my way down, I'm going to come in here with some white. Scoop that into the center and work my way out. So I didn't clean my brush off at all for this step actually. I still have some yellow and orange on there. Now I'm just working the white into it, and I'm working from center outward. Kind of looks like the rays of light are shooting outward away from the setting sun. I'll bring that way down here behind the deer, behind the little doe. Try to fill in all of the white spaces, like between their legs and things like that. Like I said, you don't want to have to mix the color later and come back to fix it. It just becomes a little tricky to color match perfectly. And I'm kind of a perfectionist, if I'm being honest. That's my weakness. And I'd like to get it all on the first go. I'll pull just a little bit more white out here. So your sky will be pretty white. It might be tricky to see the outline of your deer even if you want it that light. But just remember, you know, the silhouette will be dark, it'll pop, so don't worry about that yet. And then I'll come back in with some orange on the edges here. So now, like I said, look at that water, dark purple. I do not want my sky to turn brown, so I'll set that off to the side. I'm going to designate this cup for my lighter colors now since I'm getting into that. Still painting the edges of my canvas as I go. The hardest part to remember. And I'm actually going to pull the white all the way out to the edge. This sunset's going to be big and bold and bright. Still using my large brush. And if you're following along with your directions, we're just going to continue all the way to the horizon line. We want to avoid the grass. So I'm stopping at their feet, and my horizon line has a very slight curve to it, just like this. I'm just going to mark it off right now with some yellow so I can know where to stop. Otherwise, like I said, I'll get carried away. And I might just paint right over my grass. If you do go into the grass area, acrylic is super forgiving, so we'll come back over that with green once it dries, and it will be just fine, I promise. If you want a little more orange in your sky, go ahead and add a touch of red. I might add just a touch more down in this area since it was a pretty abrupt change. And I really do like those oranges in sunsets. So I'll mix a little more of that. I'm just going to pull a few streaks in, just on the edge actually. Not too far in. I'm almost scribbling my brush back and forth. And I don't have much paint on there either, so there you have it. Just really fill in all that white space around your deer. And then we have some beautiful reflections to put in there tonight. If you've never painted reflections, don't be too intimidated by it. I'm going to teach you a very simple way to do it. It'll make it very convincing. Your deer just standing next to a beautiful shimmery pond. Okay, so as you can see, my yellow kind of turned into one color there, just a big old block of it. And now I want to add some more highlight. So I'm losing my light source. I can't really find where it's coming from. I'll just clean off my brush now since I'm using pure white. And in the example, you can see how bright that is. It almost looks like it's just the canvas behind them. And I'll come in here and do some more white. Kind of like a spot of it, and then just pull outward and upward using only horizontal strokes. Once you start using strokes in different directions, it gets difficult to make it look like a sky, kind of like the sunset. You want them to all go the same direction and just bleed into each other. So I'll have it brightest just behind the buck. And fade out. Just keep playing around with the ratios. Our skies might look a little different. And I want to see what your guys' are turning out like. So if you would like to post them on Facebook when you're done painting, we love to see them. Okay. I want just a touch more back here and a touch more off to the other side. Oh, Nancy, you have the... Oh, so you also have the small canvas. Okay. If you ordered new brushes, they will look different. We don't use those ones in the studio, so you got the brand spanking new ones. Or if you ordered the used ones, now we are selling the brushes that we have in studio. So I'm using used ones, and they might not look exactly the same. We give you the tools that you need to paint this one, though. So don't be concerned since they're not identical. It It should work out just fine. And hey, maybe you got ones that work even better, so I can't wait to see what you come up with. Okay, so I'm really liking that sky. It's kind of a fiery, bright transition there down to the sunset. Looks like I have orange juice. Hopefully I don't drink that by mistake. So I'm already done with my sky, and I'm going to keep on just for time's sake. And the next bit will be our grass. So to do this, we're just really color blocking where our grass will be. And then we'll add in all those pretty details where you can see the thin strips of grass or the thin blades of grass. But first we're going to mix our yellow, and again, just a touch of our blue since that's our darker, more powerful color. And we're doing the middle tones of the grass. So you want this to be like your most medium value that you're going to put in there. And then we'll come in later to make the small details of the dark shadows with our little brush, and then the lightest lights in the grass. My grass goes like this. It bows downward, and even a little more so below it. It kind of looks like a grass bridge. That's how I like to think of it. So it'll be a more curved rainbow here, a little more flat just on the top. To do this, I'm using my large brush, and it says to mix blue and yellow to make our green. And now we'll use some short choppy strokes upward to make the grass. And I actually want to make it just around their feet. I don't want my deer to be floating above the grass, so you can really come in just around their hooves too, and maybe just a little bit over it. And before I get too crazy with my grass, I'm just going to paint a thin line. I want it to stop here. Just about there. That's my guideline. There. Now I have my ending point. And I'm just doing short, choppy strokes. I don't have my brush turned this way. I have it turned this way, the skinny way. And I'm holding it just like a pencil, just kind of short, choppy strokes. If you want your grass to be a bit darker, throw in some more blue. There you can see there's some difference in it. I like that darker color, so I'm going to continue with that. And then I'll make my shadows even deeper. And I'm still doing the sides of my canvas since I started with that pattern. Another thing I've seen some people do when they come in is finish the painting without painting the edges at all. And then they go back in later and paint it all white or all black. Or you can just leave it how it is. It's up to you. Just some different styles, or maybe that's something you've never tried before and would like to try something new with your paintings. I'm not adding much water to this. I want my grass to be thick and choppy. I actually haven't added any water. So this is just paint. The bottom of the grass here can be a little more solid, like I'm actually kind of pulling my paintbrush along, scooting it. Oh, and Heidi, I mixed yellow and just a really small dot of blue to make this beautiful green here. So just yellow and a little dot of blue. And I'm going to make my grass go a few different directions. Instead of just having it pull all one way, now I'm going to come back in and just make it dance around here, going different directions. Just like it would be growing out there next to a pretty pond. You can make your grass tall, you can make it short, however you like. If you want them to be on a golf course, you don't even have to paint in the blades, just. But I think this adds a pretty cool effect. So, I'm going to make some kind of medium-sized ones. And I'm going to bring the grass up to the doe's mouth here, so it kind of looks like she's grazing. And I don't want to miss her front foot, otherwise I'm going to have her floating. Okay. very, very choppy. So make sure you're eliminating all that white space between the sky and the horizon line. We don't want that to be empty. So cover all that up. And my paint is starting to dry, so I've got to work a little faster. I mean the paint on my palette, not on my canvas. It's okay if the grass dries on your canvas, but that acrylic paint likes to dry quickly. It can be good or bad depending on how you look at it. It's good in the sense we can paint over it with any other color pretty quickly and fix our mistakes, but it does push you for time when you're painting these. Okay. So I like how my grass is getting kind of textured here. I'm just about done. I'm going to switch back to my darker cup since my grass is dark. This shouldn't affect it very much. You won't be able to see the purple in it. And I don't want to muddy my grass, so. Okay, so my middle color is almost complete here. And now we'll add in the highlights with just some lighter grass in the front. So if you look closely at the example, you'll see that where the light is hitting, it's quite a bit lighter up in this area and through the center. And then off in the corners, where the hill slopes down, becomes much more shaded. And we're often taught when we're little, when we're kids, that shadows are black, but that's not actually the case all the time. So if you look at, everyday objects and you look around and you look very closely at their shadows, they're not perfectly black. So to make our shadows in this grass, we're going to be using some blue. I think that was the hardest thing for me to learn when I was painting outdoor scenes. One of my art teachers was like, no, you're painting everything black for your shadows, but you need to add in some other fun colors. So that is what we will be doing tonight. Okay, so there's my whole middle ground. Beautiful. I like the colors. I wish I could see your guys's too. So now I've got all my choppy brush strokes, and now I will switch over to adding more yellow and white to my green. So my paint already dried, as you may have noticed on this palette. I'm going to whip up another batch of it just by taking some more yellow and blue again. But I'm going to have more yellow than blue this time. So you can see between these two colors, this one's much lighter. Okay, now I'm going to continue my vertical strokes, just upward here. And I'm going to make them more so in the middle. Now it might not look like there's much of a difference, but once we start adding in the darker strands, it's not hair, the darker, wow, the word's escaping me, blades, then you will see more of a difference. So I'm just doing a few lighter ones in the middle here. And this is pretty similar to my medium color that I've already made. I'm going to make this one just a touch lighter by adding some white. So if you're finding that it looks exactly the same as the color you've already put down, add just a touch of white to it. And then add a few in. Now you can see them pop out a bit more on my canvas. And I'm just literally touching my brush to the canvas very quickly like that. And it's staying very central, just middle there. Out here is where the shading happens. Okay, this is just a quick step to add a very small amount of highlight. Now I will wash my brush off and switch to my darker colors. So take that green that you just mixed and add some more blue. This should be darker than your original green that you made. I'm going to make mine considerably darker. I want there to be a lot of contrast. It's almost completely blue if you look closely at it. And then I'm going to go along the edges of my pond here and just add a few short ones like so. And then I might just take some pure blue in here. So there's just pure blue on my brush now. And my grass is still a little wet, so it's blending pretty nicely. And I really want this whole edge to be dark blue or dark green, whichever you choose to go with. And then I'll pull it up just to the sides a little bit on the corners here, and a few random ones here. So this is kind of the area where the light's just starting to creep away. And we lost it in the sunset. Right, and I don't have any questions, so you guys must be cruising through the grass. This is a pretty fun step, just little repetitive motions. And I don't want my dark to creep up too far into the middle. We worked hard to make that light, so I'm going to keep it that way. And I'll just have dark blue and a very small line down here along the bottom. This is just down by the water. For these ones, I like to use just the corner of my brush, like the very tip, and I'm not putting my whole brush flat down here. If you can look in the side view on the bottom left of your screen, I'm using only the corner to do these little jagged marks. It's just kind of a more controlled way to do it. And then the further out to the edges I get, more blue. One thing you absolutely can do is add just a touch of darker paint right next to the deer. So it might be a little difficult to see in the example painting, but there is just a tiny bit, like right here by the hooves. A very, very soft shadow by the feet. Just like that, and just small short ones again. And then once we add in that silhouette, it'll look really cool. Right now our deer kind of look like little angelic deer, just glowing. And then I'm going to go through and overall, the centerpiece, like I said, should be light. I'm going to add just a few very small sporadic shadows, like so. But it should be darkest on the outsides. And I like to make my horizon line darker up here on the sides. And that creates quite a bit of contrast. And you can see it still kind of looks like this bowl shape here where it's light in the center. Creates a cool optical illusion. Okay. So in that time, my grass actually dried pretty quickly. I didn't have much paint on there. And it's a little tacky in some spots, so I'm just going to fan it. And then I'll come back in with my very small brush and add the lightest strokes that I can to make the very foreground blades. But if you have like a piece of paper or a plate at home, you can just gently fan your grass if you're done painting it. Otherwise, I know some people like to go plug in the hairdryer, but by the time that you go get the hairdryer, I'm pretty positive your grass will be completely dry. So it's probably best just to fan it or like blow on it even. That works really well too. And then you can just do a little very gentle tap test where you just gently touch it, and mine is completely dry. No paint came off on my fingers. That's from before. Okay. So next, I'm going to switch to my small brush for the first time in this painting. It was getting kind of lonely, and my bristles were kind of all over the place, so if your bristles are sticking up, a little pro tip is just to dip it in water and then wipe it, kind of like spinning it on a paper towel, and it just whoop, pops them all back into place. So the lightest blades that we're going to make will be the ones that are closest to us in the painting, and they pop the most. Whatever color you used for your lightest one previously, make it lighter. So I'm going to add some white to mine again. This is almost pure white at this point. And I'll just do a couple blades right here in the center in my lightest portion. Now this part you can definitely add water to your brush. Since it's such a small tool to work with, sometimes our paint doesn't want to spread as nicely. So I'm going to add just a touch of water. Might take a little bit of playing around with it to find the perfect ratio, but I'm pretty confident you guys will figure it out. And I don't want to cover all of the colors I had before, but this is really just like a final nice little detail. And don't be afraid to make it super light. Like, it looks kind of daunting on your plate. You're like, oh my gosh, that is so white, it's going to wreck this. It won't. It'll add some color and make it look like the light is really catching those grass blades. Just a couple over here. I don't want to go too crazy with this. I'm pretty happy with the colors I have already, but this will just brighten it up a tish. It's like, look how bright that sky is. It's got to match. Okay, there are my few random strays. Okay, so now I'm happy with my grass. So I'll move on to the next bit. If you guys need me to slow down again, just reminder, throw that out there. I feel like I'm cruising on this one, but it seems like we're all doing okay. Just to give you guys a little bit of time, since I did zip through that grass pretty quick, I am going to just go back in and touch up my sky for 1 second here. I'm starting to see my canvas through my blue, so I'm just going to put a little bit more blue in my corners, and I don't want to cover up all that purple I worked so hard to blend in, so I'll just pop a little in the corners there. Better. Okay. Yeah, if you see any touch-ups at any point that you'd like to do, you can save them till the end, or you can just go along. If I'm still talking and you're like, come on, Grace, keep up with me, and just take a minute and fill in some little details while you're thinking about it. But if you are all ready to move on to the next step, follow along with me. So, now, we're going to do the lake. If you have the instructions in front of you, I just realized that I skipped the lake as we were doing that. That's not a big deal. We're just going to work down from that. I was going to do them separately. But this is okay because now we can't accidentally paint over our grass area. So to make the bottom bit, we're going to use yellow, orange, and white, and we're just going to fill in the bottom piece here. Since it's a reflection, we want it to be, flipped and mirrored. And this will be lightest, and then more yellow out here, and more orange the further out we go. So I'll just take some pure white actually to start this off. And I'm going to go along the edge of my grass. I don't have any water in here yet. If you need it, go ahead and add it. But it looks like mine's spreading okay. Then I'll add in some yellowy orange. And you can see by putting my white first, it pulls into that color. That's what I wanted. If I were to start with just orange, it becomes more difficult to blend and it doesn't go on as smoothly. So there's a little tip for you. So it's more yellow, and then I'll make it more orange as I get lower and lower. And we'll add in all the fun shadows later. Awesome, I'm getting some thumbs up, so it looks like we're keeping up okay. Thank you guys for the feedback, that helps a ton. I don't want to leave you behind. And then I'll start gradually adding in some reds as I go, just to make that orangey color. If your sky looks a little different than mine, just make the colors that mirror what you have. Remember, this is your painting. You're the artist here. So you might have noticed that there are a bunch of reflections in the water too. We're going to come back and do that later. Don't worry, don't try to paint those in right now with your oranges. We will come back to that bit. But for now, just get this going. Since it's water, it's going to look a little different than sky. And we're going to add more ripples. So like this here, I actually really like that. It kind of looks like there's a slight wave on the water. There's just like a little ripple. And I'm going to leave that. I don't want to blend it in too much. The technique is similar, but not exactly the same. And there will be just enough of a difference where we can tell them apart. So you can see I'm leaving some white between my colors and some other streaks between them. Pulling these colors inward. So I want mine a little more yellow up at the top here. I'll just come back in with that. Got a little crazy with the orange. But I really do like these little waves down here. So I'm going to try to make them a little more horizontal so they're not so curvy. Just like that. And then I'll also come back in with some white. Reflections are pretty much all white, like when the sun is shining straight down on the water, which is what we're trying to represent here. And I'm going to do more of a solid block of white in the center and pull that out. Pull it out in varying distances so it really looks like it's just reflecting off the water. And my reflection has to shift a little this way since my sun is over a bit more. And I'm using pure white for this. I want there to be some really powerful white streaks in here. Brightest where the sun is like directly hitting. And then I'll add a few random ones as I work my way out. So like here, and I'm gonna bring them all the way to the edge of the canvas. Now you want this to be light because when you come in with your reflections of the deer, you want them to pop a little bit. And that's why I'm making this so light. Although we have like red up in the higher part of the sky, I'm actually just mirroring this section here, the lower half. So sorry about that, we went out of order, but that is okay. It won't wreck our paintings, I promise. Okay. So once we get done with our background, we've pretty much done everything that we need to for our base coat. And then I'm going to go back in and make the clouds. So we want to make them kind of a deep purple color. And for this bit, you're going to want your large brush and it needs to be dry. I'll say that one more time. You want your large brush and it needs to be dry. So if it's not dry, they're going to look very blended. For this method, we're using dry brushing to make them look kind of puffy and fluffy. And I'll show you what we're doing there. So, you're going to want some purple for this one. And to make that, I'll be using my red and just a little dot of blue. It needs to be a pretty dark purple. You want this one to stand out a lot. And it's almost like that intermediate purple that you started with. So, ooh, I like that. It's very, it's kind of like a powerful color. Very strong. So I like that one. Bold. I'm going to wipe most of the paint off my brush, which might seem counterproductive, like why did we just mix that, Grace? What are you doing? But I promise this will make your clouds look fluffier. You want a very small amount of paint. And These ones are a bit more red than the example. If you want them to be more purple, take a touch more blue. And that'll make it a little bit more purpley. I might actually do that here so we don't lose it in the sky. Okay. And again, wiping off my brush, or most of my paint, and trying to keep my brush pretty dry. Your sky has to be completely dry for this to be effective. So I'll do my little tap test here. Yep, it's good. It's not tacky or anything. And now I'm going to make the darker areas of the cloud first. We'll come back in and do the highlights later. But first we're going to do like little swirls. So it's kind of like scribbling. I'm just scratching little circles on my canvas. And some of these darker clouds, like the darker values, are probably going to blend into your sky way up high. And that's okay, because if you do look at a sunset, you're standing outside looking right at it, you're like, oh my gosh, it is kind of hard to see them. They blend in. And I'm just doing little scribbling motions. And the bottom of the cloud is pretty much horizontal. I've got some blue in there, so I'll come back in and scoop some of that off with my clean brush. Okay. And then I'm just making the bottom bit a little more horizontal, and then I'm making the top just kind of puffy. It'll raise up, and then it will come back down to that horizontal line on the bottom and kind of taper off, just like that. Your clouds aren't all going to be the same. Like mine is, this one here is not going to look like the example. I might add a few more clouds, I might add a few less. We'll see what I'm feeling when I add the second one. And then maybe I'll do a longer one here. So I'll start at the end. And if you look from the side view, you can see I'm just scribbling. I'm just doing a little swirling motion, hardly any paint. And it takes a bit of effort to actually get it to show up on the canvas. I want this cloud to be a little thinner. And then kind of taper off like so. And this one's going to run right off the canvas, just like that, and spilling over onto my edge, which I'm painting. So this method should be making your clouds look pretty puffy and kind of fluffy, since the bristles are very dry. If it's not, try to dry your brush off even more. Yep, and Nancy, I have some purple. So I mixed red and a little bit of blue until I found this purple color that I was really liking. You can make it more red or more blue depending on what you like and what you think will look good in your sky. But I'll just keep mixing that in there. And I want mine to be a little more red, so my ratio will be more heavy on the red. And then instead of adding these 3 clouds like in the example, I'm going to do another one down here, just like a small little puff ball. And I'm never changing colors, although the sky behind it is changing. My clouds are staying consistent. Still just going in crazy circles here. It's okay to get behind the antlers too if you'd like to. You'll go over it with a darker color anyway, so it will look like the clouds are back behind your deer. Ooh, I'm liking that. Okay, so I'm kind of loving my clouds there, and I think I'm very happy with how they're turning out. I am going to add a touch more blue to the top of this one, so hopefully it pops a little more. Okay. Then once you have your dark values, wash your brush out, dry it again. And now we're going to mix just a touch of white to our purple and make a medium, like intermediate color. It's hardly any at all, like it's still pretty dark. It is lighter than the plum color that I had before though. Just enough so you can make a difference. Okay, and now I'm going to do this new color, paint this new color just on top of what I already have, but not all the way up to the top edge. So paint this on top of what you already have, but not up to the top edge. You still want that top edge to be very dark. So it's actually very difficult to see on my camera, but it makes a subtle difference. And it's nothing that is too crazy, but it's just enough for the color change to be gradual, because we'll add a brighter highlight at the very bottom of the cloud. And it appears I need some more red in here. Okay, this is actually almost a pink color, what I have going on here. And it doesn't have to be solid, it can be more sporadic on top of your cloud. The way light is caught on clouds is kind of crazy. And they're not the easiest thing to paint, despite, the fact that we've probably been painting them since we're little or drawing them in coloring books as those cute little puff balls. They're actually sometimes very tricky to paint. So be patient with these ones, and you can keep coming in and using different ratios of darks and lights until you're happy with it. And then I want my clouds to get lighter as I go toward the bottom, since that's where the sun will be hitting them. Okay. So now I have my intermediate color, that middle ground. And now I'll come in with even more white, just a touch more. And I want this bit to be pretty light. This color will probably look nothing like what you have for your clouds. This one is almost almost pink, like very bright pink for mine. And I'll add a touch more blue so it's some more of a purple. But you can see I started way out here with this dark plum color, and it's already worked up to this very bright purple. Again, getting most of my paint off and just going along the edges. I'm hardly even touching my brush to the clouds at this point. And I'm just doing kind of crazy little swirls, only along the edges. Okay. And I actually want it to be even lighter. So it might be difficult to see on your screen right now because my paint is wet and it's creating a glare. But once it dries, you guys will be able to see it a bit better. But I want there to be a huge contrast between the top of my cloud and the bottom. So I'm just adding more white in actually as I go. And then the same thing on my other clouds here. Making sure that bottom edge isn't perfectly straight across, but giving it a little bit of, some movement, some lumps on the bottom there. And you can pull a little bit of that highlight up into random areas of the cloud. So I've kind of color blocked that section there. Now I'm going to make it blend nicely. If you find that you put too much light in, like up here, I'm like, oh my gosh, that got kind of white up high. Just come back in with your dark color again. Boom, cover it up, no problem. Wouldn't even know I did it. So just keep bouncing back and forth between your lights and your darks until you find out what works for your clouds. And let's see if I can give you a little bit of a better angle here. So my paint is still pretty wet, but you can see that there is quite a big difference between my colors. I'm just doing circles. Maybe you want your clouds to look like something. Like I know when I was little, I'd always look up in the sky, and my siblings and I would be saying, oh, what does that one look like? So maybe you want to add like a little hidden thing into your painting. I just thought of that now, so sorry I didn't present the idea earlier, but maybe you'd like to spice it up a little. Okay, so there are my clouds. I might come in later if I think it needs more highlight and add some more white in there, but for right now, I think that's a really good start for them. So I'm happy with that. Next, we're going to move back down to our water. My lake is almost completely dry. The only bits that aren't are like the thick white strokes that I put in, but that shouldn't affect this step at all. And now we're going to make our reflections. So we're going to make that dark purple again with red and blue, and we'll do some quick short strokes to kind of mirror the deer. One thing that is very helpful, reflections are difficult to paint, especially if you're flipping the image upside down. So I recommend going like this to your canvas, and I'll show you what we'll do here. I'm going to use that same purple, that like intermediate purple that we used for our clouds just like a few minutes ago. And I want some more red in mine actually. But we'll make a purple with a little white in it. You don't want to go too crazy with this step. This is just a hint of reflection. So, I'd start by saying less is more for this step. Don't go too nuts with it right away. Just start with very small strokes. So basically what I'd like to do is make some of the lines in the water that are created by the reflection of the deer. So I'm going to look at this leg and follow it down into the water, and I'm going to do like a very few short horizontal strokes. Well, now they're vertical because I turned my canvas, but when you flip your canvas the right way, they'll be horizontal. And they can be like thicker than the deer. I'm going to kind of measure out with my fingers like, oh, that's about how high the leg is. And I'm going to make some of them touch, and some of them will stay apart, just like that. See how simple those little lines are? Okay, just like that, and that will be our shadow. So I'm going to just do the legs right now. And then I'll follow this foot down, kind of do the same thing. Reflections are not easy, so take it easy on yourself. This is kind of a tricky step, but you want it to be, you know, the exact opposite of what's on top here. Just by dragging that paint out lightly, you can create that. And I'm only doing the legs. I'm trying to line up the feet as best as I can, and I'm just using the kind of the corner of my brush again to scribble it on. It won't look exactly like a deer, honestly. We're just finding a little shape. We're just creating that little shape of the deer, but you don't want it to look exactly like what you have up top. That's why this bit isn't stenciled in. This is more of a free-handed section because it is just really a purple blob that kind of follows the shape. And I kind of want to connect some of these a bit more too and pull the colors out. So reflections are not perfect and just in a perfectly straight line if there's a ripple on the water, and that's what we're trying to paint here. So I'm going to pull just random areas of the reflection outward like that, and it becomes distorted and warped by the water's movement. And now I'm going to go ahead and tackle the reflection from the face. So I'll follow her mouth upward, and then it gets larger as I work my way up the head. And then her ears right here. And kind of like a neck that moves backward. And then we're going to make the body. So the body will just be a few strokes like this. Before you go and attempt this, I recommend watching this step here. I'm just doing a few streaks of purple that are varying lengths and sizes. And I'm actually going to make mine run like off the canvas, like all the way to the edge, so it looks like it's really stretched out. And then the deer's bottom here comes out like this. And I'm leaving light colors in between. That's kind of the trick here. If you've covered too much of the light, or you think you have, wait till this dries and then come back in and add oranges and yellows later. But definitely wait until it's dry and be patient with it. Nothing ever turns out well if we panic, right? So we just take our time and kind of have some fun with it. Okay, and there's the reflection of my deer. It's larger than my deer and it's longer, but that's how might actually be in, real life. It's distorted. And now I'll do the same for my buck. Exact same method all the way along. The great thing is, since he has his head up out of the water here, or out of the water, up out of the grass, you don't really have to paint his antlers. They can kind of run off of the canvas. So I've got his little legs and then another leg here, and you can see this leg bends backward. So it's going to mirror the one up on top, and then come back in. And then this leg goes back in toward the body. Reflections are very, very tricky. And then his belly. And then the rest of his body just runs off the canvas. So like I said, you don't even have to worry about trying to paint the reflections of those delicate little antlers because, that would be a task. Now I want to add in some more dark purple. Make it a little more solid. I would definitely say this is the trickiest step of the painting, so it might take you a little more time. I've practiced this step a few times and I've got a rhythm down, but it does take a bit to get it just how you want it. And I recommend throwing in some oranges and some reds. I'm going to throw in a couple of red streaks here, just between the purples. Kind of blend that through. And then this is just kind of going to be my darker color here. It's okay to make them mix a little more. And I'm using red to pull some of the purples together. But I am still leaving these streaks of orange and yellow since the light is still kind of catching the water. Water's kind of funny like that. And I'm also going to pull out the shadows on his legs, on the buck's legs, like I did on the doe's, once I have it mapped out where I want it to go. If you're having trouble spreading it, throw a little bit of water on your brush. Look at that, totally different. Much, much easier to spread. Okay. And there I have my shadows. I'm pretty happy with how those are turning out. I'm going to add just a touch of water to all of these areas since it's blending it better. But still leaving hints of my other colors. So once you flip it back over, you might look at it and go, it doesn't really look like deer. But when you step back from this painting, it's okay if it doesn't match the deer exactly. It's just really a shadow cast out onto the water. So no panicking there. It looks good, I promise you. And once you have these shadows done, now we're going to tackle the actual subject of this painting. They've been waiting so patiently. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is take black and a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm going to fill in the deer. This step kind of requires some precision and some focus here. So take your time, especially when you get up to the antlers. It is difficult to correct this step if you do go outside of the lines, so really take your time. Another thing that will help you is to anchor your hand on something. My hand doesn't have paint on it that's wet, and so definitely check that first. And my background is dry, so I'm gently resting my hand on my canvas. And I'm just filling in all these areas. When I get down to the grass here, the legs kind of disappear, and instead of making like one solid block for the leg, I'm actually just tapering off in between some of the grass blades that I've already painted. So if you're wondering why their feet look pointy, it's just because they're disappearing into that grass. And if you want to make it look more convincing, like they're standing in it, come back in at the end of the painting and you can throw a few more green blades over the dry deer, like the feet, and it'll really look like it's just kind of coming up around their hooves. But I think this is pretty convincing that he's just chilling in the grass, so I'm okay with how the feet look right now on mine. If you're having trouble, reaching over to your deer, the easy thing to do is to flip your canvas around, and I'll get to that when I paint the doe, but that's just something to think about. Since I'm painting the buck, if you're left-handed, you can flip your canvas upside down or however you want to do that, just so the deer is closer to whatever edge you're painting next to. I don't recommend resting your hand very hard like in the center of your canvas, just because it's a pretty delicate object that you're painting on and you can dent canvas very easily. And once it's dented, you can't really undent it, unfortunately. You'll add a little dimple. And dimples are cute on cheeks, but I don't know if you want them on your canvas. And if you want to add a little tail to the deer, I see that you can't even find one on my painting, so add whatever else you want. If you want your buck to have bigger antlers, go for it. Have some fun with it. And my clouds are dry. I'll just double check that so I can scoop my hand up really gently. I'm hardly touching my canvas at all. It's really just to balance it out here. And even though you have small paintbrushes, I know this step can be difficult. Like, even that antler got a little bigger than I was hoping it would, but just kind of roll with what you've got. If the antlers get bigger than you thought they would, well, the deer probably won't be upset. He'll probably be happy. And I'm just filling in all this white space. Hopefully there's not any left and your sky has covered all of it. I did cover most of my antlers in some of these areas, so I'm just going to paint over a bit of the sky. Like so. I will hold my breath at this step. It gets so delicate in here. Okay, almost there. Make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush. I get excited and I dip it into the paint really fast, and then sometimes you have a little bit too much and it gets difficult to control. So take your time with this. Okay, so I'm done with my buck, and like I said, to make your life easier, simple trick for you. Flip your canvas around. Ta-da! Now my doe is much closer to my hand and so much easier to paint. Now we just color inside the lines. So we are actually in the home stretch of this painting. This one's kind of fun. We're cruising through it. And the last thing we'll do is add some more white to the ripples in our water. If you are happy with your pond, that is just fine. I am going to add in some of the reflection of the grass though. You might have noticed that was missing. So I'll just throw in some greens and a little bit more yellow to my pond. I think that'll kind of enhance it a bit. All right, and I want to know, what did you guys think was the trickiest step, or what was your favorite part? Throw it in the comments if you care to share. I want to know what your favorite part was, because I actually think this is a pretty fun painting. I like doing this one. There's a lot of different components to it. Okay. Whew, that is the most stressful step. But not actually stressful, because you can pretty much fix any mistake with acrylic. If you do happen to go outside the lines, I can show you a quick fix. And I'll actually demonstrate it. So like, oops, I got black on my yellow. If you act fast enough, you can just put some water on your brush. Make sure your brush is completely clean. Go over it, and it'll start to like pool, and you're like, oh no, oh no. Don't panic. Just go like that. And then you can wipe it off with a clean paper towel. And if your background is dry, it'll just pull it right off like that. So, if your deer gets a little bit, out of hand and it gets kind of crazy, just make sure your background was dry and then wet your paintbrush, and you can really just scoop the paint off gently. You can't even see where I got the black before. So it's not super easy to correct, especially if it's like connected to the rest of the deer. But I'm confident you guys can fix it if you do go outside the lines. But if you're careful right away, you probably won't have to be. Okay, and there you have it. We have our 2 deer sitting up there in the sunset. And there's all the details I'd like to put on them. So I will flip my canvas back around, and I'll show you guys the very last little step here. If you're not done with your deer, that's okay. If you'd like to watch this next step and you're not quite finished, you can always just pause your deer and come right back to it. Since it's just solid black paint, it's not difficult to just pause for a moment. But there we have it. I'm happy with my deer. So now we'll go to the last one. So for the ripples, we're going to use some green and then put those reflections in here. As you probably noticed, it looks pretty bright in this area. And to fix that, I'll come back in with my brush and just throw some green in too by the feet. If you'd like to use your small brush, I invite you to do so. If you think you have more control with it. Now that you've painted with both, you kind of know which one you have better control with and, the style you can paint in. But I'm going to stick to my large brush since that's what I originally started with for my little grass blades and my pond. So I'll continue with these horizontal strokes, and I'm using that kind of middle ground color. I actually have to remix it since my paint dried in that time, but that's just fine. And I don't want to use much green at all. This isn't going to become a crazy overpowering step, just a couple little quick strands. So I'm going to go right up by the deer already. by the reflections. And it's okay if you let this touch the grass. I want this color to be lighter than that darkish area of the grass that I've already painted. And I'm just doing a few horizontal strokes about as high as I think they would go up on the deer's legs. And I'm still leaving white and yellow in between. And I am touching that meeting point between the grass and the water with this color. Just pulling straight out to the side from it. Keeping it horizontal. It's kind of a finishing touch. Encourage you to leave some colors in there still. And if you do think, like I said, if you think you covered the light values too much, let all of this dry and then come back in with yellows and whites. I can show you how to do that. So that's all I want for my grass. Very little, very little. And now I'll throw in some more white and orange and purple where I think it's needed. I think that my painting needs a little bit more white to show that it's water. And to do that, I'll just go straight into my pure white, hardly any paint at all on the brush. And I'll just do a couple long streaks over the top of what I already have. So we worked really hard on that beautiful reflection of the deer, but lake reflections are kind of funky in the sense that there's always these little white streaks across it. I'm going to put a few very, very short horizontal lines right next to the shore too. Just like that. And I don't want to put them all in one area. They'll be more sporadic, and it will be lighter toward the center here. So, kind of liking that white, and I don't want to see the purple underneath it. Just like that. And since my brightest point is actually by the deer here in the center, I'll put more white brush strokes in that area, just like that. And now, to kind of balance it out, now you just come back in with yellows, purples, whatever you think it's missing. And I want a little more orangey yellow in there. So I'll remix that again and put a couple streaks in where I feel it's needed. It might cover up some of the purple just a touch. I'm going to re-highlight some of the areas I covered previously. And finally, just some pure yellow. It doesn't matter what order you go in for this. If you want to add purples, you can add some purples. Go for it. But I think this is what my painting's missing, so I'll add what I think it needs. Throw some yellow there, a little there. And try to make these paint streaks vary in length. So you've got a really long one across the center here, and then a couple short ones out on the side. I'm pretty happy with my reflection. So if you step back from your painting, you might be really surprised by what you just made. It looks like a big mess if you're up close to it, as you know, you guys can see. If you're looking right up by the water, you're like, what in the world is that? But then as you back away, you start to see, oh, it's just a simple reflection. And your eyes aren't even drawn to all of these crazy squiggly lines right away. You look straight to the deer, and then this creates a very convincing reflection. So that, I'm done with my water, and this is kind of an optional step. If you'd like to frame your painting with some grass blades right here, I can show you that too. I'm going to use my large brush again. But if you're happy with how open this painting is, I suggest leaving it. However, I do know that some people might like this little framing bit. So I'm going to throw just a touch of white into some green and yellow. The white will just make that color more opaque, and it will cover everything else a bit better. if you just do blue and yellow to make the green, it can become a little bit transparent. So a touch of white will help you a lot in this step. And all I'm going to do is start at the corners and do a quick stroke like that. Hardly any paint is on my brush because I don't want it to get too thick. I recommend doing a few practice ones on your plate. I'm going to have some going back the other direction, some going more upward. You want your lake to be dry or your pond to be dry as you do this step. So mine is very dry already. Dried very quickly. And then I'll do the same on the other side. You don't want to go too crazy because then you hide all your reflections that you created. But if you want just a few blades here and there, throw that in. And then they're getting a little light, so I'll just add some blues or some blue in there to darken it up. And it's good to add a couple different colors. So there I've got some darker values and some lighter, as you can see. And it really just pops in that corner. Add some shadows to our grass. This painting is really all about the shadows tonight and using them to make parts of the painting really just pop off the canvas. Now I might want to touch more yellow. Throw that in there. And you know, it's just not quite as dark as I want it to be. So now I'm going to be indecisive and come back in with some more blue. That's kind of how painting goes. You just look at it, get a feel for it, keep going. See what it needs. Ooh, and then look at that dark. Adding that dark blue. Oh, yep, I like that much better. Throw in just a couple streaks of that. Fabulous. There is my shadow. So I think I've told you this is the last step about 14 different times, but I promise that was actually the last big painting step. So to finish your canvas and to show that you're actually done, go ahead and sign your initials in the bottom right corner when you're done. I know that I usually like to use a Sharpie because that's kind of the easiest way to go and you have a lot of control over it. Otherwise, you can paint your initials on if you're being really brave, or put them on the back. I like to put the year on my canvases so I can look back one day and go, I wonder when I painted that. And then I kind of have a reference. But I definitely recommend doing that. Awesome, I'm glad you love those ending touches. Hopefully, you guys all try out what you think you need on your canvas, and please, please post it. We love to see what you guys create. I seriously go home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have seen this in person in studio. They are fantastic. Okay, so my corner is pretty much dry enough, and I just want to show you really quickly that last little signing of your canvas. Since this corner is pretty dark, I'm just going to use black. Normally I use a color that blends with it pretty well. In fact, I lied to you. I'm going to mix that with some green so it's not too kapow. I don't want it to stand out a lot. I'm mixing black with some green to make just a very dark green. And then I'm going to paint my initials in the bottom right here. I'm going to practice it on my plate first so they don't become huge. You want just a little bit of paint. Yep, and that's about what I want it to look like. So I'll come in here. And there we go. So if at first glance you can't really see it, and that's kind of what I like. My style is more, hide the initials away and make people look for it. If you want to do something kind of funky like hide it in the grass or something like that, absolutely go for it. It'd be kind of fun to paint like your name just right here along the edge or way over in this little inconspicuous area. Completely up to you. Add your own final touches to it. This is your painting. So that is absolutely everything. I will stay on here for just a couple more minutes to see if anyone has some questions. But as I'm just cleaning my things up, don't be shy. Comment what you thought of the piece or what you think like you might need some help with, and I will stick around for just a few more minutes to help you out with that. But thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I hope you had fun. This is one of my favorite pieces that I've done so far with you all, and I hope I can see them on our website later. Or on our Facebook, not our website, but the Facebook page. Just remember when you are completely done to really wash out your brush as well and get all of the paint out all the way up to the attachment point here. Otherwise, you're not going to have very much fun painting next time. It'll get all crusty. And while you're thinking about it, go check out our Patreon if you'd like to see some other videos. They're posted weekly. There's a schedule for which videos are posted. They're not any videos that you've seen on our lives usually. There will be a couple new ones, things you haven't found on the YouTube or the Facebook page. So go check that out if you're curious about it. Just type in patreon.com and search Creatively Uncorked. If you subscribe, you'll get access to even more videos, and definitely check out some more art kits to go. You can order them right to your doorstep, and you can have some more fun like this. Order as many as you need. And I'm not seeing any more questions popping up, so I think I'm going to leave it at that. But thank you guys for joining me, and have a good night. Bye.